Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video I want to talk about the Star Wars novel Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. This was a novel that first came to my attention through the Collider Channel's Jedi Council as hosted by Christian Harloff, who is very much a big-time Star Wars fan. I mean, everyone on that show, it's a weekly show, basically talking about Star Wars movie news and canon news, and that's where I first heard about this particular tome, and he just has, raved about it nonstop. And I was very much drawn into the synopsis where effectively we're following the lives of these two people, basically from childhood to adulthood, set against the backdrop of the original Star Wars trilogy and building up anticipation and leaving off as sort of a precursor to The Force Awakens. So it is officially, considered canon. These events really happened and everything. It features lots of great cameos from original, trilogy characters, from Princess Leia, Darth Vader, Grand Moff Tarkin. Toward the end of the piece, you see Lando Calrissian and everything, all that kind of stuff. All the events are touchstoned, the big events, I should say, between A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and it very much leaves off with the hints of things to come as we await The Force Awakens, and it's just a fantastic novel. One of the things I can say from right out of the gate, to echo Christian Harloff's appraisal of the particular novel, is that it's very organic. It never for one moment feels like it's not genuine Star Wars, and that's not only because of the events that it does touchstone, the big events throughout that trilogy, but it's also the characterization of the two primary characters, Ciena Ree and Thane Kyrell. They're both sort of, from right out of the gate, there's almost a Romeo and Juliet feel to them, and that's one of the things that really drew me in, sort of Romeo and Juliet meets Star Wars, in the fact that on their home world of Jeloken, there is sort of a division in the ranks, if you will, of the settlers that inhabit that world. Thane is very much, coming from the second wave settlers. These were people who came much after the original settlers of the planet, which Ciena is actually one of the, sort of ancestors of. And they are more the country bumpkin, they've been around for a while, it's their home world, it feels very natural, they're very naturalistic people. And they have a certain particular, gauging of honor, and even if it's to their own detriment, will they, just believe in honor to the last. And that's something that's very much hallmarked by her character and the things she goes through and the experience she has all throughout the course of the story. Whereas Thane is very much, he is representative of kind of the more chip on their shoulder, those country bumpkins need to be set aside, very posh and thinking highly of themselves, second wavers. And so from right out of the gate, they are sort of, their coming together is something you don't necessarily see. It's kind of like an odd coupling, if you will. Not something that either one of their families is very, happy about. In the case of Thane, his family are just almost malevolent. The father is a drunkard and has beaten him almost to within an inch of his life on certain occasions, even in the course of the story. His brother's just an ass, and what brings them together, though, is a mutual love for flight, for soaring through the skies, and for this mutual hope before they even meet. It's a shared hope that one day they will become pilots within the Imperial fleet, within the Empire. This world considers the Empire and all it can do for them to be grand and beautiful and peaceful, and they have succumbed to the lies as we, the outward viewers of the Star Wars universe, know what the evil, the Empire represents. They don't see that. There's an almost idealist viewpoint of the Empire in their childhoods, and they both end up with a couple of other kids, try to sneak in to see TIE fighters when Grand Moff Tarkin has visited their world to, officially annex it within the Empire's machinations. And so Tarkin is kind of the first prominent character from the original trilogy we see, and he's actually very sort of happy at the just the gumption of these two kids who, when all the other kids run away, they, Ciena and Thane stay there and confront him and admit to what they did. They wanted to break into this hangar and get a glimpse of a TIE fighter or a shuttle, whatever it is, up close and personal, and he lets them aboard it to look around at the controls, the flight controls and everything like that. And this very much spurs on their interests. So we follow them from that point going into an academy, one of the many Imperial academies all across the universe, basically, and there's actually, they are both posted to Coruscant, and we sort of are with them as their training is unfolding, and they're being very supportive of each other, until at one point it looks like Thane's, he has to construct or build or repair like a laser cannon, and it looks like it's not going to work, and when they open the inner casing, it looks like wires have been cut, so there's a lot of suspicion, what's going on. Thane has some ideas as to who might have done this, but the evidence actually points to Ciena. Like, somebody may or may not be trying to manipulate the events. While there is a competitorship between them, you never for 1 minute believe that they could actually, she would actually sabotage his work for her own benefit. They've been very playful and competitive, very supportive of each other, as I say. And so this does end up casting some doubt, though, because then new evidence suggests that it was Thane himself who did it and tried to make it look like it was Ciena who did it and everything like that. And so we see the first sort of parting of the ways of their characters. And that's something that happens again on and off all throughout the course of the novel. Through the events, as I say, of the original trilogy, once they have graduated and everything like that, they have been estranged, but they keep finding ways to come back together and to, like, confront each other again. And they both basically, with all the time they've spent together, with all the support they've given each other, they very much fall in love. But their duties and their sort of outlooks on the world and the universe and the way things work constantly challenges whether or not they can or are willing to be together. And that amidst, as I say, like the first destruction of the Death Star from A New Hope to the blowing up of Alderaan, which is actually precursor to that, how that affects them, how that calls into question for Thane especially, what he's even doing in the Empire. Like, he finally sees the Empire for what it is, and that's very much what also, creates tension between their relationships, because she is so much, impacted by honor and, sacrifice and all these things. She has it sort of twisted in her mind that, well, they must, and by they I mean the Empire, must have destroyed Alderaan as, sort of a precursor warning to not let this become a galactic war with the rebels, the Rebel Alliance. And she's fooled into believing that's the case. And that very much is what hallmarks her staying true to the Empire through the entirety of the story, whereas Thane falls out of love with it and becomes sort of on the run. He ends up going AWOL, and eventually he runs into Wedge Antilles, who talks about the Rebel Alliance and what their goals are. And while Thane himself is not an idealist along the lines of, what he considers the Rebel Alliance to be, they're talking about creating a new republic and creating peace for all the planets and everything like that. He doesn't necessarily know if he believes that, but he knows something needs to be done to shut down the malevolence of the Empires led by Palpatine and Darth Vader and everything like that. And so it just adds the extra tension of the divide between both of these two characters, Thane and Ciena, respectively. And as you go through the course of things, at one point you see that Ciena is on a Star Destroyer as it visits Bespin, and the events, if you're familiar with The Empire Strikes Back, of Han Solo being captured and Darth Vader wanting to go after Luke Skywalker and all this kind of stuff. All this stuff is happening in the background while these characters are dealing with their own situations as well. And it's so exciting for that, because it's a new perspective, a new story evolving through familiar events, through events, seen from different eyes. It very much gives you a sort of humanizing effect on all those stormtroopers and TIE fighter pilots and all these kinds of things, where you're getting to know some of these other characters, the friends of Ciena and Thane respectively, who are in the Imperial fleet. It gives you, less of the aesthetic that, oh, these are just blank faces. Whenever I'm watching Star Wars and I see TIE fighter pilots being, blown out of the sky, or X-Wing pilots who were much more humanized in the films because they're not wearing, sort of the just uniform armor and everything like that. You can actually see these are people. You feel for the Rebel Alliance. You feel for them because you see interpersonally that they are people, that they are, interacting together and all these things, whereas the Empire almost seems robotic, in the fact that there are no human faces. You just see the Stormtrooper armor. You just see the TIE fighter armor. And this particular book gives you insights into how they're all people. Even, those Imperial pilots and soldiers, there are people under those uniforms. And they care, and they have hopes, and they have dreams, and all this thing. And so it creates a gray area rather than just the black and white, good versus evil. And I absolutely love that. As I say, the story evolves to the point in Return of the Jedi where there's a new Death Star, and the Empire, the Imperial fleet, has all gathered because they're, laying the trap for the Rebel Alliance, which Thane is now fully a part of at that point in the story. And Ciena herself, because of certain events in the course of the story, certain sacrifices she made, she is actually going up that, sort of ladder of rank and everything like that. So once the events of Jedi have closed, she gets to take command of her own Star Destroyer. And that's very much what you see on the cover. Without wanting to spoil it, this cover is tantamount to how this story for these characters plays out. And it's something very poignant that is noticeable in the trailers for The Force Awakens. And I'll leave it there to your own estimations what that means. If you haven't read the novel, I highly recommend that you do. Again, it's just a fantastic story that really, for its effects of delving into the Star Wars trilogy as we know it and revisiting those things and seeing it through other people's eyes, other characters' eyes, as well as having this deep and engaging back and forth of these two characters who are meant, for all intents and purposes, to be together. But they're also strong individuals, both Ciena and Thane respectively. Neither one of them is any stronger or weaker than the other. They're very much well matched. They're very much on equal level, equal footing. And they each have their own principles and their own thoughts and ideologies and their own, sympathies toward one or the other of these sides. And while Ciena herself is sort of begrudgingly, by the end of the tome, coming to see what Thane has seen ages ago, there's still that level of her personal honor that she can't move beyond. And she may almost bring herself to her own destruction, were it not for Thane to be there to catch her in the end. And it's just a fantastic novel, a fantastic story, totally worth every moment. I sort of poured through this novel, read it in a matter of days, and I feel like I want to revisit it again. I want to read it again because it's just absolutely fantastic. It's a fantastic novel, and I'd very much, I'm left by the end of it wanting to dig into more of Claudia Gray's works. I know she's a young adult fiction writer, and she has written at least one trilogy. I think she has another in the works as of the time of this recording. But her writing is fantastic. Her characterization is fantastic. While this was billed as sort of a young adult Star Wars novel, don't let that even persuade you against delving into it, because it's just a title. It's just a way of referencing it that it doesn't even equate how grand in scope, how organic and meaningful, impactful this story and its characters is. And I couldn't give it more higher praise. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you've ever heard of this particular novel, if you've read it yourself, what you thought of it, and if you'll be checking it out as per this recommendation and review. Otherwise, I'm going to be looking forward to The Force Awakens. This was a hell of an awesome chapter, sort of building up that tension and that anticipation between the original trilogy and The Force Awakens, and I can't wait to see how the events in this story, if they do have any sort of play into The Force Awakens, or if it's going to be completely unrelated and just a footnote of an outer sort of view, a wider, grander view of the universe as we head into it. It's just going to be a grand time indeed, especially for a Star Wars fan like myself. Since childhood, Oh yeah. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.